Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide in this meditation practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week we'll explore something somewhat practical, somewhat real as a drawing device, especially to me in architecture and the design of the world. But it's also very accessible. Just a few different types of lines, a few different meanings to those lines or curves and geometry that we can put onto a piece of paper. We put them together in the right way with a little bit of thinking and imagining. They can come out to be something that tells a bit of a story of a place, a site, the location of some events to happen. So we'll work on a site plan. The view from above of where all the things are and how they're related to each other. Those things might be synthetic, built by humans, like buildings and walls, roads, driveways, or they might be natural. The trees and forests, the contours, the water features, anything that happens there. And sometimes they blend between when we plant the trees and put them in a specific order, a specific place. So we'll explore all that and let our mind unfold a little bit of a story there on the page. Don't worry if you've never drawn one of these before. Again, it's just some geometry, some lines, some curves, some shapes, and little gaps between them, and see where it comes out. I'm going to work primarily in pencil today, but pen should work fine too. We're going to do a bit of shading if you want to along the way, so something like a pencil can be nice and quick just to let the hand move in a different way so it doesn't get too tied down to one way of drawing. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. And then for the drawing, I was working on a site plan and thought it'd have some fun things we could explore through drawing if we just build them up a little layer by layer. So there's a few elements on a site plan that we can look at, tell us some things. One would be the main feature. We'd draw ground, it would have some contours, so it's just lines that kind of roughly follow each other or do weird things. The ground changes very quickly, but you get... So the site plan will tell us how the ground goes up and down, little bumps. And in an architectural sense, you might have a building, which could just be something with a shape somewhere. You may have some things like little walls. It would just be a rectangle that holds some dirt back on one side or the other. You might have a road, right, or something that comes in and makes a driveway. And of course, you'll often have trees. And trees can be very useful to know where their center-ish is, so we can locate them and make sure they're not too close to something, or just make sure we avoid them while working. And trees can be placed as they fell, naturally, or sometimes you get areas where trees are placed in a specific pattern, maybe an orchard or just for a hedge or a visual effect. And they have roughly a circle around them. Some people like them to be crisp circles drawn with a compass, others wiggly things that look a little more tree-like. And that's some basic things we have there, so we can use those to slowly build up some layers of a drawing. One fun thing with the trees is when they overlap each other, we can draw them all together in kind of a nice little foresty clump to talk about density, or maybe the aesthetic intent of the tree. But some curvy lines that layer some objects that look planted there, some paths through, and some foliage will be our palette. I think I'll stick with the pencil, just because then you can draw over the top and do some quick shadings. There might be some chance to do a little tone and texture. As we've been away for a little while, I'll take a minute or two just to make sure we've got everything set up. Take a few breaths that fill out the torso, all the way from the shoulders and the rib cage down to the stomach. The abdomen expanding out on the inhale and relaxing back into a nice state, presence. And then again, filling out east, west, north, south, up, down, and sinking in. Take as many of those as you like anytime throughout the exercise, noticing where The breath expands where it interacts with your clothes, with the area around you, with the air in the room. Just a chance to center and take note of where you are. And on the page, moving around the paper just to know where you sit, where you stand. Adjust as necessary if some areas are hard to reach or you feel cramped or anything. Comfortable distance. And I think we'll begin with placing a view of the synthetic elements of a site plan. A couple of structures, a few walls, maybe a road and a parking space or something. So any shape you like. It's a very high level mass, but somewhere on the paper, some kind of shape that has that little bit of made by human materials nature to it. Doesn't have to be a rectangle. It can have a little bit of play and fun to it. Just getting some polygon on there, or it can even have a little bit of curve. That's something that takes up a little space, plays a little game with some shapes. Maybe that's a little house building in the forest. Maybe it has a couple of neighbors, some smaller things, a little shed off to the side in a similar language. Maybe a little house over by a gate. A small composition of shapes. Any shapes will do just fine, right? There could be little buildings, they could just be little shapes. And maybe a few of those have some ground defined around them. Perhaps a little terrace or courtyard made out by some walls. So a wall just a line or curve that heads off in a direction, can turn if it likes. The thing that starts to make it into a wall is having just a little bit of thickness. So after a trajectory may be established, you can take a moment, take it in, and then retrace, just slightly offset. It's a good time to take a nice breath. Steady the body, steady the mind. Provide just a slight thickness and track along with it. A little wobbly, a little wiggle to the edges. Might just be the stone the wall is made from, or the intention of the designer. Not really align with a bit of thickness to give it some shape and some presence to hold back a little bit of soil, make a little bit of flat area for the things people do. We could do a few of these around. Walls can layer, can collide, can build off of each other. Maybe they form a little bit of ground around the structures. Each one an opportunity to establish a relationship in space between large shape and edge condition. Taking that breath moment to do the retracing, to bring dimension. With a little care and closer attention to tracking along. Taking some time with it, noticing the edge of things. And spend a little time with this first phase, establishing a few relationships between the shape and the wall, getting into the breath, and slowly growing the arrangement of elements. And what could be a site, a place of landing, a place of occupation, where some events will unfold. Site for our breath to track along with the edge of the pen or pencil. A site with open edges and light boundaries, or maybe fully enclosed, depending on your take on the condition. And we can come back and add any of these as we go and find opportunity, but once the building generally sits somewhere a little bit flatter, a wall generally holds dirt one way or the other, we can begin to imagine the shape of the ground, the contours that move through the space. A wall might be the beginning of an edge of a contour, coming out of one, and this imaginary line that kind of describes a cut through the landscape at a certain height, come from the wall and extend off towards the edge of the page, so finding any edge of one of the walls, taking a breath in, and letting it begin to wander its way from there towards an edge in any way you want. The first one establishes the beginning of the measure. You can start to imagine or define uphill and downhill. Perhaps the ground moves down away from the building. Good idea for your drainage. And we can layer those contours now away from the wall, the slope heading downward, tracking kind of along the same path, but free to have its own little bumps and wiggles. The ground's usually generally in sloping same direction, but there's always flat spots and tight edges. Each one of these a chance to breathe in and follow along a nice contour of the earth. Let the breath leak out into the page. And they kind of go off in a direction until you run out of room. Then we can come back and imagine it heading in the other direction. If we put some things up a little bit on the hill, contours might start to wrap around it. This other wall, for me, a place another one could come out, maybe part way through. Contours are continuous, except when people get involved and start to shape the ground, and they might dead end into a wall. Very rigid. They'll be picked up somewhere else at some point in time, depending on how the ground is shaped. And just working your way from one side to the other, corner across, or left to right, playing in these contours, taking a breath at each one, noticing where it might move along parallel, and letting the hand perhaps give it a little direction of its own. If they begin to circle in around something, that becomes a high point. You might start to see a little bit of that here. A little hill forming around ear structure. Thinking about where it could continue through and pick up somewhere else. But really, we're not measuring them, so we can just let them play out, see where they end up. A breath guiding the curves through and around some of the structures. We can always add ones in between. If we want a little tighter transition, the ground might be moving a little quicker there, a little slower in other places. As long as they move in and out of the page together, they form some connected, infinite slice through the earth below. I've got a few elements playing a game around each other, some above and some below, some heavy and some light. little map forming. And in that space, you can imagine, again, hill, up or down, sunken area, perhaps even a little water feature, pond or lake, or a few trees and foliage to fill things out. Maybe first we'll have one more synthetic element, little road leading into our place here. Maybe it follows a little bit of a contour. Tracks between a few, the road a little bit sharper. It kind of goes mostly straight, has a more mechanical curve to it. Moves into place. It has an offset, condition of thickness that tries to track along just like the wall. We like to make things with a consistency, a little easier to measure, a little easier to control. And maybe it has a little room to turn around, to define space through and around our little cluster of buildings. And as it may cross contours or move along them, it's just denoting the slope and the hill. Two things, one projection of a real, the other an imaginary way of measuring the earth, giving us what we need to know about a place, a site, condition. We might take a moment to read over what we have, bring a little change of intensity, bring forward some elements. Can imagine a structure or a building being a little bit heavier, a little bit more of a shape or form projected and disrupting the ground below. So we give it a little heavier line, make it pop a bit off the page, make it stand out from what's beyond it, a little more pronounced than the edges or the curves of the driveway. It's a little taller, a little closer to us. The walls too could have a little bit more weight if they're very light, maybe a little bit of shade, a little bit of intensity of tone to make them pop from the contours that they ride with. Just a retracing to bring emphasis and a little hierarchy visually to the paper. As the elements begin to stand out, now we can explore them as a site, as a place of natural land, constructed or synthetic land, and start to play the game of filling in the surface, foliage, or other elements of natural impact. Perhaps a long driveway, a row of trees, perhaps a smattering of natural forest, a large clump a little further from the house. You don't want them too close, they tend to fall over in a storm. I start to imagine a little world there. But to do our trees, what we'll do is place their centers in wide open areas, a little plus sign or a little dot. We just space out several of these, start playing around. They really have no true relation to a contour. That's just an arbitrary cut at a certain height, so the tree lives where the tree lives. Though as people, we could plant them along a contour if we were so inclined, reading it from the map, bringing it from the imagined world, the measured world, into the real world. We're just placing a bunch of little marks of centers, playing with the density. Where would there be a lot? Where are there a few trees? As naturally happens. And as you make these small marks, which can happen pretty quick, or you can take a little time with each one, take a little time in moving between the mark. Just look at the density that might be forming. Think about where the natural trees fall, where we might introduce a few synthetic trees, ones planted to be a feature of the world. And perhaps along the driveway, there's a consistently spaced set of little centers that work along the road to make a nice little drive. Maybe throw you in a part of it. They go on both sides. Maybe there's one or two in a special place, held by a wall or framed by a little bit of the building. This series of little dots a chance to come back through and begin to give them presence, a little shape on the page. A little circle around each one, taking a moment, adding more as you like. Anytime you see an opportunity, just make a little mark and draw roughly a circular shape around it. Deciding where you'd like to begin to introduce a series of circles, their radius, the size of the tree. And then I'm going to start to frame them in around. Again, they can be smooth or have a little bit of that wobbly edge. Sometimes the wobbly edge helps make it more of a circle than the smooth one. They can overlap, stay away from each other. As trees are, they have different sizes. They're just trying to be mostly equally circular around that center mark. Doesn't stand well. In each one of these interactions, the repetitive but varying shape, a nice chance to revisit our breath, to lightly ride the exhalation around the journey of the foliage. To inhale between each moment. To exhale through the action. And to spend a little time, a couple of minutes, listening to that place, inhalation and exhalation of location and drawing. There's also an important factor often in the construction of a site plan. Sometimes if you plant trees, they don't start the way they will be intended to end up, and you choose where you draw them, sometimes to show the progression or the end, the ideal or the real. You can add more anytime, keep working through the centers you have, look around the landscape for other opportunities. Perhaps, as mentioned, the contours reaching down can offer a condition of a small pond or something, an element that stands out in the landscape. It can be lightly differentiated with a little surface shading, some wiggly lines going back and forth, not quite waves or ripples, but just a suggestion that this is different than what's around it. Perhaps a little edge to it, maybe even a little piece made by somebody, a dock, and of course a couple of A couple of trees around the lake. In there. You can also look to the trees and play with their density, places where they cluster and clump, bringing them together, calling out the heavier area of foliage by just retracing the edges, giving it a little bit of character and shade. Hiding the intersection in the canopy. Maybe even bringing a little bit of shade or shadow to it. Very light set of simple lines or soft shading to differentiate tree from background. To make some notes of what will be covered and what will be open. And eventually bringing that, you have the time, to every tree cluster. Working our way through the drawing to see where things come together and combine, where they stand alone. But in the last couple of minutes or minute or so, imagining the world that this starts to form down there, looking at it from above, seeing the relationship of things, the dimension of things, thinking about what might take place in different parts of the world. You can even begin to bring in other elements, little people, picnic, some cars, some animals, and start to tell a story about what unfolds down there. Maybe there's some landscaping with flowers or a small garden. They all start to find a place in the site, turning it from a location into that condition of place and habitation. And more layers of little details can pull that out, maybe even some color and tone at some point. Having a little fun rendering it, but now we have the start. Location, the way the ground moves, the way the people interact with it. Now it all ties together as one landscape. And as the time draws near, making some notes of places that draw your interest, things to call out through a little bit of shading or difference, layering of tone or texture, maybe returning after a short break to see how they shape up. And when you're ready, letting the pen or pencil rest for a moment. Close the eyes for a couple of breaths and just take in your space. When the eyes are ready to open, let them take in fresh the arrangement on the page. See if they notice the things we thought they were when we put them down, or see new spaces in between, new opportunities. And in a design sense, another layer, piece of tracing paper, continue to develop and refine the place until it exists. While these drawings might be sometimes used to tell someone, a contractor, a landscaper, whoever it is, where to put things, or sometimes just to map it out to know where things are, they're also a device for imagining a story. The nice thing about drawing is it always takes a bit of time. It can only make it go so much faster through practice of technique or some little shortcuts or tricks to how you move the pencil around, but it still takes that time. We can breathe into that time, we can sit with that time, we can let that time unfold and not worry too much about it. We can rush trying to get something done. That happens when we're doing things for productive means, but when we have a little bit of free time to explore and play, we can just let that movement, that breath, that action, that place develop. Let our imagination run wild. Let things like the little path to the little stream with a little dock on it emerge from what we see on the page or what comes to our mind as we give it some space to breathe, some space to be creative, some space to play. Sometimes we can accomplish a lot in 20 to 30 minutes, a whole place, a whole world unfolding there on the page. And all that takes is giving ourselves some space and time to let that unfolding happen. If you enjoy the exercise, please let me know in the comments what you found through your exploration of sight. Share with your friends and come back each week for more episodes of Mindful Drawing. And whatever you do for the rest of your day or evening, draw well. Thank you.